Welcome to the Living the Dream podcast with Curveball. If you believe, you can achieve. Welcome to the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, a show where I interview guests that teach, motivate, and inspire. Today, I am joined by author and therapy dog trainer and executive director of the Human Animal Connection, Genie Joseph. This nonprofit organizations help reduce stress by increasing the human animal connection. So we're going to be talking to Genie about her organization, why she started it, and how they are helping people. So Genie, thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, it's so good to be with you today.
Why don't you start off by telling everybody a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so as you were mentioning, I am the executive director of a nonprofit organization, and it's called the Human Animal Connection. And we bring therapy dogs to people who are in need of comfort and joy and lowering their stress levels. So that could be everything from high school students to people at the VA to 911 operators to women getting out of domestic abuse situations, all kinds of situations where people are feeling maybe a little unsafe or a little unstressed and need to re-experience the joy of life.
Okay, what made you want to, found
Do
this
this?
organization and
Yeah.
and be a part of it?
Well, I was volunteering at the animal shelters, and that's a pretty difficult place to be. You're seeing animals and times of stress, and I thought there's got to be something better that we can do. And I began learning these healing methods that could help animals that were in shelters, especially the ones that were very afraid, because when they were cowering at the back of their kennel and people came to see them and the dog was shaking, they didn't want to scare them, so they just moved right on. And so I noticed that the scared dogs had the least likely chance of getting adopted. And so I was really interested to see what could I do, even in a few minutes, even with just a couple of visits, to help the dog reorganize their nervous system, to begin to trust people, to be able to look people in the eye and be able to say to a person, "Hey, take me home," in doggy behavior. And so that's what got me started. And there was a dog in the shelter, and this was when I was living in Hawaii, and it was a high kill shelter. It was a small shelter. They only had a certain amount of kennels. And there was a dog who'd been there a really long time. And he was a pit mix. And he had been literally a prisoner of war. He had escaped from a situation where they starved them to make them more aggressive to hunt wild pigs, wild boar in Hawaii. And so he had scars all over his body. But I took him home. He was the most gentle dog I have ever met, and he became my best therapy dog. He could do what I call read a room. So he could be in a room full of soldiers sitting in a circle. These were soldiers hospitalized with PTSD, and he would say hello to each one. He knew who was afraid. He would skip them, but he could tell who was suicidal. He would just do what's called an alert, where he would just sit in front of them and look them right in the eye until they melted. And it was so inspiring to me to see how he could understand, who was really who was really in trouble, who really needed help. And this was the early days. This was 2010, where it was not easy for service members to talk about what they were experiencing emotionally because they didn't want to be disconnected from the military, and so they kept it to themselves. And so it was really important to be able to have a way, because if you ask them on a survey, "Are you suicidal?" They'd check no. This is what was done. And so to have an animal who could, without any judgment, without any criticism, just simply notice that somebody needed a little extra connection and love. And that really changed the course of my life. When I saw what Oscar, that was the dog's name, could do, I said, this is it. This is my passion. This is what I want to do. I want to bring this to the world. So that's how it started.
Where you talk about the circle of good, how does the circle of good help humans and animals heal?
Yeah, thanks. A good question because it's one of our first principles. We have 33 principles in the human animal connection. And the first principle is this notion that good is not just like a value judgment, like as in good or bad, but it's an energy. There's an energy of goodness. And when you can tap into that energy of goodness, you're going to feel uplifted. You're going to feel a little bit more engaged with life. You're going to feel a little more hopeful. And when people say to their dog, "Who's a good doggy?" in their nice little doggy voice, a lot of people do this. I know I do it. I do it all day long. It's really good for the dog, but it's also really good for the human. And so what I say is that emotions are contagious. All emotions are contagious, the good ones and the not so good ones. So why not promote the good ones? And so the most basic and fundamental good emotion is the goodness of beingness, the goodness of life, the goodness of animals, the goodness of humans, and we can go on and on. But tapping into that energy of goodness is good for you and is good for all the beings around you. So that's what I call the circle of goodness.
Talk about telepathic animal communication. What is that? What does that mean?
Yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Is that something that you believe in, or is it new to you, or where are you on that?
It's new to me.
Okay, new. All right, great. Yeah. So some people have they're hearing those words for the first time. What telepathic communication means is that we can communicate mind to mind regardless of time, space, or distance. So that means I can communicate with an animal that's in another room, that's in another city, that's passed on. So there is we believe that there is a continuity of spirit or soul that continues even when animals have passed beyond physical form. So the ability to communicate with animals in that way is called telepathic communication. And it's two ways, meaning they can communicate with us and give us information and give us messages, and we can communicate with them. So it's a refined style of communication. I think it's a very natural style. I don't think it's anything like magic or supernatural. I think it's natural. I think it's normal. It's just that we have not learned, young children do this. They talk to animals and they think that animals can hear them, and this is completely normal to them. And then they go to school and they learn, no, no, that's not true. You're making that up. So it very quickly, children learn to erase that from their availability range. They stop communicating with animals, which I think is very sad because I think that there's so much that we can learn from animals. The way they see the world is so valuable. They have a kind of wisdom that we have lost touch with. And when we learn to communicate with them, we learn not only some of their opinions, what they want and what they need, but also how they see the world and their perspective on things, which is very often very beautiful.
Well, something else that's very new to me is a animal chaplain. Never heard of that before. Talk about what an animal chaplain is.
Yes, so I am an animal chaplain, and what that means is that we perform chaplain services for people and their animals. So that could be all phases and stages of an animal's life, everything from looking at the relationship with an adopted animal, say from a shelter, and how that's going, all the way through all stages of life. I've also written a book on canine nutrition called Wholesome Canine Cuisine. So I'll help people understand what might be going on with their animal and how a change of diet could help. And then also, of course, the hardest time in any pet person's life is an animal getting ready to pass. So we help them through the whole process, whether that be checking in with the animal and seeing, is this your time? Do you need help? Do you want to go home? Is there something special you want to do before you pass? So our job is very much about listening to both the human's feelings. Are they, most people aren't ready, but are they resolved? Are they feeling that the animal is complete with this lifetime? And sometimes we'll help set up a communication link between the animal and the person before the animal passes. So, for example, one of my dogs, Sophia, when there's a little yellow wildflower, she'll find one in the middle of a desert. And that's a sign. It's like a connection to spirit, and I can receive a message. So it's really interesting when you start opening up the realm of animal communication. So an animal chaplain will help a person navigate through these different stages of life. And of course, the most difficult stage, which is the passing, the letting go of physical form.
Well, talk about what does it mean to drop in the donkey time and why is it important for connection?
Yeah. So we have this we have two miniature therapy donkeys and their names are Rosie and Lily, and we adopted them during the LA fires. They were in that area and we were able to adopt them. Their person had passed away and they were in need of a new home, and we brought them to our sanctuary and they have a wonderful life. And they are therapy donkeys. And what we teach people is what's so beautiful about just being with them is they are just in the present moment. They just look you right in the eye and they see you for who you are. And they don't, they're not worried about, how much money you have or who you voted for or anything. They just are just seeing you as you are right here and right now. And we call that dropping into donkey time, meaning just this present moment is fills their entire radar of experience. It's just what's happening right here, right now. And for humans, we get awfully busy with our minds. Our minds are wonderful things. I know my mother had dementia, and I know what it's like to have someone lose their executive function. So I'm not anti-mind, but I think as humans, we need a balance between our thinking brain and our heart and our gut. And when we get those three things in alignment, that puts us right into the present moment, which is where we can experience joy and pleasure. You can think about something in the future that might feel good, but there's nothing that compares to actually being in the moment and being able to experience pleasure fully and completely.
In your experience, how does simply being around animals support physical and emotional healing?
Well, when you have an animal, especially one that isn't traumatized, one that's in good shape and healthy and well, they help us regulate our emotions because of this quality of being calm, of being present, of being still, of being right here, right now. And when we are in their presence, our energy kind of attunes, gets into sync like two tuning forks. We help each other to be in that calm place and that presence that simply content with the way things are right now. The sun is shining, the hay is in front of me, the water is here, just the simple things that bring a sense of safety and joy back to people. It comes from being with therapy animals. So yeah.
Well, you also have a high school program that's designed to help teens build resiliency. So talk about that.
Oh, thanks for asking about that. Yeah, our high school program is called Canines Teach Compassion, and we bring the therapy animals to school. And we've been working with kids who are in counseling. So, kids who have issues, like one year we worked with kids who had lost a family member to COVID, or kids who are anxious or isolated, and these are not just small problems, there's been an interesting statistic that just about all of the violent shootings that have happened in schools have been people who were loners, people who weren't able to form connections and connect to people, and they felt very lonely and disengaged. And so loneliness is a serious problem. In fact, the former Surgeon General, Vivek Murthy, called it an epidemic of loneliness that's going on, and it's across all ages, but there's a particular a high spike in the teenage years. I think we can all remember our teenage years. It wasn't easy for all of us. Some of us had good years, but some of us really struggled with our identity and other issues. And, how do we fit in? And I'm too different from everyone else and all this things, all the angst, teenage angst. So when we bring the dogs in, it's really wonderful because the dogs are happy to be just who they are. So we'll bring in, let's say, five different dogs, and one of them is a 130-pound bull mastiff, and another one is 20-pound my Sophia Chihuahua mix. She's a rescue, or they're almost all rescues. And we'll line up five different dogs, and we'll say to the kids, "What's the same?" Well, they all have tails, they all have ears, they can see all the same. And what's the difference? And they'll have different colors, different sizes, different shapes, different breeds, different temperaments. We can see all of that. But what's beautiful is that the dogs don't care about differences. They're interested in sameness. Oh, you're a fun dog. I will play with you, or you're a quiet dog. You're a balanced dog. I'll play with you. So they orient towards what's the same. Not that they're unaware of what's different. They can tell that you're not, they know the difference between a llama and a mouse, but I mean, they might not have the name for it, but they know the qualities that are different in those two creatures. But what they do is they sense the sameness. And this helps kids to see what happens when I look around and see not how is that person different from me, but how's that person the same from me? And say, well, maybe that person's a different gender or a different race or a different religion, but just like me, they're new to this town and this is a new school for them and they're having to adjust. And maybe I could be the person who goes over and says, hey, you want to sit together at lunch or I see that you have a unicorn on your notebook. Do you like unicorns? So whatever it is, to be the person who reaches across to the shyer person and connects. And it's very easy to do that with dogs. And we show them how what's easy to do with dogs, you can also do with people.
Let's take a quick break.
Okay, everybody, it's Michael E. Cullen II.
And I'm Sesame and Carta from the All Too Real 2 podcast. We're passionate about movies, TV, and pretty much all things pop culture.
Dive into the chaos of failed sitcoms, direct-to-video sequels, and the quirky realms of cinema and TV.
Join us every Thursday for your dose of All Too Real 2 entertainment.
We'll guide you through debates like whether Howard the Duck qualifies as a superhero.
Ponder if Larry the Cable Guy could be the new Rock or Schwarzenegger.
Discover if some shows and movies should have stayed in the cutting room.
Ever heard of a sitcom featuring that dictator with the funny mustache? Well, we watched it.
We're dedicated to unraveling the peculiarities of pop culture, sometimes with awesome guests.
So, if you're into the eccentric world of pop culture,
listen and subscribe to All Too Real 2.
Available wherever you find podcasts
and on Age of Radio.
Well, we know that dogs get triggered too. So how do we recognize stress in our animals and help them manage it?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, one of the things that we do in our program, Canines Teach Compassion, is we teach them how to recognize stress levels and we teach them at 10 scale. So, 10 is the worst stress. 10 is a dangerous situation. Somebody's going to get hurt, a dog or a person. We never want to be at a 10, but it happens. It does happen. And 1 is completely relaxed. Nothing is going to bother you. A noise could happen. The dog will maybe look over at the noise and then go right back to resting. So dogs are not like a 7 as by nature, but we are moving up and down the scale of energy all day long. So they're going, wake up at a 2 and then the doorbell rings and they go to a 7 and then they get a treat and they go down to a 4. And so we're moving all along. And what's interesting is that when we teach the kids to recognize stress levels in dogs, we also point out that they can use the same scale to understand their own emotions because we're going up and down the emotional scale all day long. We're going from feelings of calmness and safety to stress and worry and all these different things. In the course of a day, 100 times we're shifting up and down that scale. But when we recognize that scale, we're helping the brain to come back into balance. It's kind of like a way of regulating our emotional states without the story, without well, he did this and she did that. It's not the story. It's just a number. It's a 5 or it's an 8 or it's a 2. And this really helps kids understand their own emotional states. And what we do is we teach them some mindfulness and imagination techniques that will help shift the dogs. So the dogs will go from maybe a 5 or a 6 with all the activity in the room. And then we show them how they can do this relaxation exercise, which takes the dogs, and dogs respond usually immediately within 30 seconds. They go right into relaxing on the floor and they can see, oh my God, these emotions, they're real and they're energy. And they're contagious, and I can make a difference. I can change the energy in the room simply by getting calm myself. But the side benefit is when they're getting the dog calm, they're also learning how to calm their own system. And that's why it's so valuable to do that.
Well, talk about the difference between giving touch and taking touch, and also explain what is invisible touch.
Okay, great. Yeah, so taking touch is like maybe you've had the experience if you have an animal sharing your life and you're on your phone and you're petting the dog and not really paying attention, you're scrolling. So your attention's really on the phone and not on the dog, and you're kind of on autopilot. That's what I call taking touch. You're just kind of, it's good for you. Maybe it's not so great for the dog because the dog's not really getting your full attention, your full focus. You're not really present while you're doing that. And of course, any touch is a good touch. I'm not trying to criticize it, but it's just to say that that's a very narrow experience. Giving touch is the notion that it should feel as good to the receiver as to the giver. So that's when my full attention is on my dog or my donkey. I'm just really present for them and I'm paying attention. Does he like the way I'm touching him now? Does he want more, less, harder, softer, lower, higher? I'm really attuning to his responses to my touch and paying attention. When's enough? And sometimes they'll tell you they'll just walk away when they've had enough. But when I'm in giving touch, I'm really attuning to what feels good to my hand, what feels good to their body. And I want to make sure that I'm in a comfortable position when I'm doing giving touch. So, because if I'm tense or stressed, I'm going to be translating that right down my arm, right in my hand into their body. And they really don't like that. They really don't need that. They don't need our stress. They much prefer our loving touch, which is our presence and our full energy on them. An invisible touch is like, let's say you have a dog. If you're volunteering at the shelter or you're in a zoo and you can't physically touch the animal, you're not allowed or it's not safe. Maybe that animal's not ready to be touched. I do what's called invisible touch. And so let's say to take the example of working in the shelter, volunteering in the shelter, I will go in and sit with that dog in that kennel, that dog that's very afraid, and that dog's first reaction, we call them pancake dogs because they're like flat as a pancake, making themselves as small as possible in the corner of the kennel. And I don't go over to the dog. I sit as far away as I can in the kennel, which is probably about 2 feet. There's not a lot of room there, but excuse me. What I'm going to do is I'm not going to touch the dog. I'm not going to approach the dog. I'm not going to look at the dog. I'm not even going to talk to the dog. I'm just going to sit there and be as quiet as I can. And I'm just going to, in my own mind and in my own heart, I'm just going to feel, good dog, you're safe now. Good dog, you're safe now. Not saying those words out loud because it wouldn't mean anything to the dog. Dog can't hear it yet anyway. But I'm in the energy of goodness. I'm translating to the dog. I'm broadcasting, as you will, the energy that I'm a safe person. You're a good dog. I'm a good person. It's safe for us to be together. And I'm going to sit very, very quietly until the dog begins to feel safe enough to trust it. So what I'm doing is I'm touching the dog, not with my hands, but with my thoughts, with my heart, with my energy, with my focus. And very often, I've never had a dog not respond. I've had some dogs that take longer to respond, but I've never had a dog not respond to this energy because it's so good and it's so healing.
Well, talk to the listeners about your book. You made a book
Yeah.
or wrote a book about homemade dog food. So tell us, about your book and how we can safely share meals with our dogs.
Oh, great. Okay. Yeah. So I've written 2 books. So the first one is The Human Animal Connection. And that's our 33 principles of healing that I've been talking about here today with you. And that goes into more details and tells the stories of working with the dogs in shelters and in rescue. So that book, The Human Animal Connection, is on Amazon and you can read either the paperback or an ebook or the audio version. And then I've also written a book called Wholesome Canine Cuisine. And that teaches people how they can make homemade food for their dog. And they can either go 100% homemade, 50% homemade, 25% homemade. So it really meets people where they are. It's not like saying, you must do this, because nobody wants to hear that kind of thing, right? So what it is it's recognizing or understanding the basics of canine nutrition and understanding that whole foods and wholesome, healthy, organic foods are really the best, but you do the best that you can. So, for example, let's say you might say, "Well, I like to eat a hamburger." Well, okay, I'm gonna just boil up some hamburger, and some of that's going to be for my dog, and some of that's going to be for me. So there are many foods that we can both share. So it's not like, well, you have to make one meal for your dog and one meal for you. In my book, I go through how you can make a meal that's good enough for both of you. So some lightly boiled chicken or some, you just want to start with a good, healthy protein first as the main portion of the meal. And let's say I'm having a little bit of broccoli. So I'm going to cook that up because dogs don't digest raw vegetables, but some cooked broccoli or some cooked spinach or whatever it is I'm having, some sweet potatoes or some baked potatoes. all of these different things, carrots, cooked carrots, oatmeal. There's so many foods that we eat as humans that are very good for dogs. And if you're just getting started, we say go slowly. You know, you're not going to change 100% to homemade food, but when you get rid of the chemicals that are in processed dog foods, you're going to find that your dog is healthier, more vibrant, their skin is better, their coat is better, they're scratching less, they're just feeling more enlivened. So it's a really great thing to do. And that book is also on Amazon. It's called Wholesome Canine Cuisine. So both of my books you can get on Amazon.
Well, tell us about any upcoming projects that you're working on that the listeners need to be aware of.
Yes, well, we have a really vibrant website, and so I have some online classes that people can take. One is called The Heart and Soul of Animals. I also have the Canine Nutrition class. You can take the Wholesome Canine Cuisine, take a mini class that gives you the basics of why dog food, commercial dog food, is so dangerous and what you can begin to do to get your dog on a healthy diet. So we've got a lot of resources like that. We're going to be having Donkey Day on December 14th. I don't know if people are here in Tucson listening to this, but in Tucson, Arizona, we'll be bringing out our miniature donkeys and some donkeys from the rescue, about 12 different donkeys, and people can have an experience of meeting a donkey. A lot of people have never been face to face with a donkey. A lot of children are going to get to touch a donkey for the first time and just to feel the gentleness. It's so beautiful. We had about 200 people come last time, and if you could package the joy of the people that were there, I swear you'd be a millionaire, zillionaire, because it's so sweet to just be with a being that is very gentle and kind and looks you right in the eye and sees you just for who you are.
Well, throw out your website so people can keep up with everything that you're up to.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. It is thehumananimalconnection.org. So all one word, thehumananimalconnection.org. And we have a free newsletter. You can sign up for that and get all the good stories that we have going on.
We'll close this out with some final thoughts. Maybe if that was something I forgot to talk about that you would like to touch on, or any final thoughts you have for the listeners.
Well, I would just like to say that if you have room in your life for an animal, it's a wonderful thing to help keep your heart healthy. And there's lots of studies that show that. And if you're not ready to make a full-on commitment, most shelters have foster programs, or you can even take a dog out for the day, take a dog out for a hike or a hamburger or an ice cream. But the more that you have animals in your life, the more love you're going to have in your life, and that will keep you alive and healthy.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, for more information on what Genie is up to, visit thehumananimalconnection.org. Please be sure to follow, rate, review, share this episode to as many people as possible. Follow us on your favorite podcast platform and visit www.curveball337.com for more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast. Thank you for listening and supporting the show. And Genie, thank you for all that you do, and thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having us.
For more information on the Living the Dream with Curveball podcast, visit www.curveball337.com. Until next time, keep living the dream.